If there's one man who can help, if there's one man who can help, it's the man coming in here right now.
Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the 2003 Fullmetal Alchemist fan guide, which we release on Fullmetal Fridays, part of a podcast called A Podcast Made Fullmetal. I'm trying to do roughly the equivalent of getting one episode of the series out to match, per week release with each week of the year. I've been kind of running behind schedule, so I've been clumping 2, 3, 4 episodes, I think sometimes 5 together to try to mostly meet up with my schedule, so it's just kind of the way it's been. For this recording, I want to apologize in advance. I'm a little sick, a little congested, so I apologize. My voice sounds a little weird if you hear a few sniffles, but I'll try to keep that to a minimum. Anyway, yes, we try to release these on Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which I'm mostly pretty good about. This time, we're going to be discussing 3 episodes, episodes 27, 28, and 29. They are Teacher, All is One, One is All, and The Untainted Child. So, in Teacher, this is basically the introduction of the Elric brothers' teacher, Izumi. She finally kind of gets a hold of them after all their adventures, and they're really nervous about it because they're trying to kind of hold back the fact that, well, they don't really tell her why they lost their bodies, and they're actually managing to conceal that. At least they think they are, because Al's just pretending like he's in the suit, and Ed doesn't reveal that he is Automail. So they don't really know what's happened. It's been years since they've encountered their teacher, and she's kind of upset with them, kind of hearing about their exploits, but they sort of generally reconnect. There's basically this reintroduction to the cycle of life when they find out that the teacher, of course, is someone who helps out a lot of the locals. She has a good reputation, kind of like Marco did. And there's this young girl that basically asked her to help her cat, who is pregnant with kittens, and she has the kittens. However, the mother cat does die. It's actually quite yet another little tear-jerking scene, even like a minor thing like that. And the little girl, of course, asks, hey, could you use your alchemy to bring my cat back? And she's saying, no, life only moves one way. But, let's just make a grave and honor her. And kind of uses this as sort of a stepping stone for the brothers and saying, kind of reminding them about the importance of the cycle of life and that it goes only one direction and that they can't use their alchemy to bend certain rules. That's just not the way it works, and there are consequences. And Ed even kind of asks once again if, if she had the chance to bring someone back to life with alchemy, would she? And he actually reminds her that she asked him that a long time ago, and we got a flashback about their introduction when they try to help save their village from a flood, but Izumi came and used her alchemical abilities to help them, and apparently she's really advanced and not really using a transmutation circle, which may hint that she probably did something similar as well to gain those abilities, which we find out later. And once she finds out what they did, she of course is angry, but decides to give them their reminder of an old lesson, which leads to all is one and one is all, which I'm going to take a little bit of time just to kind of go on a minor tangent, because for those of you that, are joining for the first time listening, and for those of you that have been kind of part of this channel for years, you probably know that obviously I'm a pretty big Fullmetal Alchemist fan, and my origins of it were, it was one of those big introductions to anime along with a couple other series, particularly Paranoia Agent was one as well, and as well as Samurai Champloo. That kind of was my big official introduction in anime as a separate form of medium that I really kind of saw as its own independent thing, and really got into it beyond the Dragon Ball and Inuyasha and other stuff. So it was another level with the Adult Swim introduction, but I watched it really just through cable when I briefly had it, and this was actually, I believe, one of, if not I think it was the first episode I saw, or one of the first episodes I saw. So this was, other than I think maybe having seen a scene of what happened to their mother, I think maybe a clip, maybe I think my sister showed me about the premise of the first episode, which I don't think I saw all of. This was the first one I'm pretty sure I watched on TV that I remember fully. So this was kind of my real introduction to the show, which is interesting, thinking long before streaming, when you had to kind of, wait a week, and they were releasing it in the US for the first time I'm sure everybody has a different story, and it's interesting to see the different introductions to the shows they like and what resonated with them. Because somebody else obviously could have seen a different episode and still got hooked because of the aspects of Fullmetal Alchemist they like, but it might have been something different. So, let me know in the comments what your first episode you saw was and what really stuck out to you that drew you into Fullmetal Alchemist, or even other anime or just television shows that you really have gotten to like over time. But yeah, for me, this was the first one, which I think is really interesting because it's smack dab kind of in the middle of the show, and we're really starting to kind of move along with the plot. And I will say, watching these, I do realize that some people do complain about the pacing of the first show, and sometimes I kind of notice it a little too, like it does take its time, which normally I think works really well for getting through the atmosphere and the emotions. And most of the time, I think that's great, but people that really like Brotherhood, I can understand why watching this show, it's like we're more than halfway when we get to this episode, and we've only just started to kind of touch the conspiracy and really what the main crux of the plot of this version of the show is, even independent from the manga. So even watching it again, I'm kind of like, sometimes it's like, but then again, these episodes are intriguing as have been the last couple. I think after what happens to Hughes, it really does sort of pick up for the main plot. But this one really hits home, I think, one of the big themes of the show, that kind of everything is connected, all of life is connected, and the brothers kind of realize, their flashback to their training on the island, they were put there to learn that lesson as well. They were given nothing but a knife, and they're out there just in the wilderness on this abandoned island, which is supposed to be secluded, and they can't use alchemy, and they have to figure out the riddle, all is one is all, which is not just the Three Musketeers, but it is, of course, this idea that everything's connected, and they are part of a much bigger unit, and so they're a very, very small part of a system, as all people are, all life forms are, but all together they do make this big, vast thing that is kind of still interconnected in this cycle, which there is kind of a beauty to, and they sort of realize that's sort of the principle of alchemy, is understanding that, breaking things down at their basic substance, and being able to remake things and be creative and create from that. And so to kind of respect that cycle and being able to work within the laws, which also hints that there are some things that are beyond human knowledge, and it does work that way maybe for a reason. And if things don't, work within those parameters, then problems arise, which we've seen they have. So that's kind of an interesting thing where we get parallels of that. And of course, they're being attacked and pushed to the limit. They don't want to kill the rabbit, but then they don't have any success with that. But then the rabbit gets taken by the foxes they think are cute, and they're attacked by the foxes. But the foxes take the rabbit to feed the babies, and so they realize it's interesting. There's different perspectives. They think both these things are cute, and there are these living creatures, but there is just kind of this cycle that everything kind of feeds off each other, and it feeds into the plants, and it's kind of, circle of life, Lion King sort of thing, which I think is this really interesting idea of kind of the relation of man to the natural world, and, of course, dabbling into the themes of, with science, respecting the natural world and realizing maybe some barriers shouldn't be crossed, and if you're trying, you got to be careful, So it's that keeping that idea of mystery, I think, as well. So it's a really cool idea. I think there's some interesting, potentially spiritual or philosophical ideas in there that are really, I think, one of the big core elements of the series. And there's also a lot of tensity because it's interesting that, Ed has that realization kind of as his brother's getting beaten, but at the same time, realizing that it is pure survival, he still is drawn to that idea to defend his brother who he loves, to put him into action, which I think is kind of something that almost sort of gives him another layer beyond just being essentially a beast, right? So I think that's an interesting thing that the episode tries to do. And meanwhile, in the present sense, they're being stalked again. So we think that Izumi's set somebody to attack them and push them again, but maybe it's someone else. And eventually we realize at the end of the episode, once they relearn their lesson, that it is Wrath, or who we're going to find out to be Wrath, who is another homunculi, which leads us into episode 29, The Untainted Child, which is Wrath. We'll find out. Spoilers if you haven't watched the show and you're listening up to this point. But I'm hoping you at least watch it before you listen to it if it is your first time. So, yes, basically there is this young boy that's just kind of been following them on the island. And now the interesting thing about him is that although he is not an alchemist, apparently, he is able to perform alchemy, but not just only without a transmutation circle, he is able to fuse certain things, certain objects with alchemy into his body, into his arm, into his leg, into his whole person. It's like his whole body is almost a form of transmutation circle, like a physical manifestation of it. So he's actually able to go beyond some of the laws of transmutation that we've even seen pushed already. And Ed kind of acknowledges that. And there's this scene where he turns his arm into a rock. And later on, when he's playing with this mouse and he's kind of sort of torturing it a little bit, and Ed's saying, no, once again, even though he's been through this tough situation, he still tries to respect life and not hurt things unnecessarily. And this kid, it's kind of playful and childish because he is a kid, but there's almost like it's like partially naive, but there might be a cruel streak in there. And he kind of shocks the kid when he tells him to put the mouse down, and the kid ends up sort of transmutating this bed around him, and he's kind of wrapped up in the bed, and it's this creepy scene. And Izumi bursts in and manages to kind of help him and coax him. And it's interesting, even though she seems to be kind of resistant, because Ed is really suspicious of this kid already, and Izumi oddly is not. And there's some little hints about why that might be. And also we kind of suggest towards the end of the episode that it looks like, okay, Wrath actually has an arm and a leg that aren't his. And Ed realizes he's seen this kid before. He was a creature, okay, when they were performing the transmutation to try to get their mother back. He went back and he saw the truth, the gate, which was apparently the source of all alchemical power. It was like a gateway to different dimensions. And we'll get into that possibly later, maybe more so in a Brotherhood. But looks like there are a lot of these creatures that kind of dabble in dealing with the exchanges when alchemists try to do human transmutation and try to push the boundaries. And they physically took the arm and the leg, and they took Al and then gave back his soul. And these beings are sort of the ones within that are responsible. And Izumi realizes, they have that conversation with Ed, and they both have seen it, which is why they can do the things they can, perform their alchemy without transmutation circles. And this boy, he might in fact be from there or is connected to that in some way. And they don't really say that he's a homunculi, but it's like it's suspected a little bit in the episode. But it's interesting they don't go out and say it. And Al says, I don't know if he had any connection to the others. But Ed is already suspicious of this kid off the bat because of the memory. And of course, kind of almost holds a grudge against him because he thinks it's just unfair. Like, wait, why did this kid get this? Like it should have been given back to the natural cycle or something, but no, it was taken, and literally his arm and leg, what he sacrificed for his mistake, is staring at him. And so once again, like with a lot of other characters in the show, we've got someone else who is also a reminder and a reflection of what Ed's gone through and what the brothers have gone through of their mistakes. So there's a lot of that classic duality going on in this show. So moving on to my overall feelings, general review. Really, I like these episodes a lot. I think we've really hit the point in the series where it's really hitting its stride for main plot points. It was good. It's been a while since I watched the show, honestly, a good couple years. So seeing Izumi again, it's interesting. One of the things I do like about watching the show again is sometimes I'll admit I've had some doubts, like I worry, like, Fullmetal Alchemist is such an important show to me, but as I get older, as my perceptions change, I wonder, like, is it a bit overrated? Am I going to like it as much? Is it just nostalgia? Do I have those nostalgia glasses on besides my own? And so sometimes I kind of worry about that, because I'll admit, I think when we have a lot of investment into the shows and the stories we like, and we resonate with them, I think in terms of our things that we like, even our beliefs to some extent, you wonder, does it reflect that still? And what does that say about your own identity and the things you connect to? And if you don't like it so much, maybe you've changed. And but I will say that's not really the case. Sometimes I have some episodes or some moments where I'm like, why am I watching this again? But we saw some episodes where watching these couple, I got once again those reminders of little reasons why Fullmetal Alchemist is so good that I forgot. Like Izumi's introduction, I've always liked Izumi, but she's one of those characters who I feel like I appreciate much more now that I'm older. And I love the great dichotomy she has, because on one hand she comes off as kind of abusive because she's literally assaulting her students, and they are essentially, her children. It's the closest thing to a mother they have, really, is this woman. And yet she's kind of, I know it's played for laughs, but it's kind of a little abusive. Some of it's not humorous at all, really. But at the same time, you do see she cares, and she's got that. I think it's a bit too firm, perhaps realistically, but she's got that firm side, and she also is kind of fair and caring, compassionate, because it does come from a place of love, and she has strong morals, and she's a really interesting, refreshing take on the mentor figure, because instead of being, typically like an older man, she's actually kind of a younger woman. So I think it's interesting that she's portrayed that way. I also like the design of her hair. She's got kind of like these interesting braids sort of things. I'm not sure if they're supposed to be like dreadlocks, but it's an interesting design. And I always liked her husband. I think he's a really interesting character who it's another, also kind of like when in addition there's a subplot with these episodes where Mustang is deciding to kind of move his operations and actually brings his loyal followers with him, and they all line up and says, "You're all coming with me," just his subordinates. And her husband and Mustang's crew, it's just another reminder of something I've said in the past, is that Fullmetal Alchemist just has such a really rich group of characters that even these minor characters have these elements that stand out, and they have personality quirks, and they do have little characterizations, like they feel like people that are part of the story, and in their own little way they're contributing, and they're just so good and loyal to him. And Izumi's husband is just, he's a great character, and he's mostly strong and silent. He's so big and imposing too, but he's just really likable. He's really likable in that stoic kind of way. But it's he's also a person that you can tell cares a great deal for his wife. They can express that through the artwork, just through the little shifts in tone around his eyes if he's angry. But it's just hilarious. I wish there was more of him, and I think he does maybe a little more in Brotherhood, but I like him a lot as well. So I enjoy that, and the moment where she talks about the cat, and the fact that, like, the cat dies, even that was just kind of sad. Even that little moment's teary eyed, and it's kind of reflecting on these bigger things. And man, like, I was thinking, man, why do I like to go back and watch Fullmetal Alchemist? It's like almost every episode is sad. It'll find a way to make you teary. It's like, it's a hard show to watch sometimes, but it's fulfilling. There's usually really good ideas in there, and it's kind of reassuring in a way. It's comforting for me, and I think it's ultimately a well done show. That episode was pretty good as far as that goes. All is one, one is all. I think is a great show, great episode all in all as well. I think it's structured pretty well, though still not among my favorites. I think there are some better ones, but this cluster of episodes are roughly the same. I think I would probably give Izumi's introduction probably about an 8. And I think when they go to the island, all is one, one is all, I think that's like a 9. That's probably among one of the better episodes of the show, but I just know some of the ones I've seen earlier had a little bit more going on to build up the tension and the plots, and I think there are some that are more memorable perhaps, but it's a very special one for me, and I think an essential part of the series. I feel like if you gave it a 10, that'd be fine. And I think for The Untainted Child, I give that one a 7. Like, that's still pretty good. There's still some interesting things hinted about Izumi's connection to possible human transmutations that were hinted at. There's some darker elements revealed. But not going to get too into it because I try to just kind of keep these relatively brief. But I'm sure I'll talk about it more, and I'd love to hear people's opinion on Wrath. The 2003 version of Wrath, the original Fullmetal Alchemist anime's Wrath, is, even being completely separate from considering the manga, because when I first watched the show, I didn't know about it, and it doesn't. I know people like to debate the different homunculi, and I'm sure I could do more videos about that in the future, and I may. But even within the context of the show, I admit, and maybe my feelings will change throughout the podcast. I don't know, but I never really liked Wrath that much. I think of all these homunculi, he's been my least favorite. I think it's just, he's kind of like an evil child. I know there's more tied in with Izumi specifically, but he seems kind of like another mirror for Edward. But I always felt like Envy not only has that more personal connection to him, it's just a more intimidating, interesting character. Wrath always seemed a little more one note to me. Like, I know he gets more evil, but he's basically just an evil little kid who's really not that evil. He's just easily manipulated. So it's like, I mean, I guess the fact that he can transmute a lot more of his body is potentially cool. But maybe he doesn't have a very interesting design. There's not much to his characterization, his personality, but even introduction. It's like I admit I don't really like him much more than Ed does. I don't know. I've never really been a huge fan of Wrath. I know he has his moments later, but I'd be interested to see what other people think because yeah, his introduction has never been one of my favorite parts of this show, and I mean it works, but I don't know. He's never been one of my personal favorites. Maybe I think some people really might like. I remember my sister enjoyed the character of Wrath for some reason. I think she thought that he was just kind of fun. Maybe it's the evil cuteness. I don't know. But she's the only person I know that really outright liked that character. So maybe there's more people out there, but that's just it based on my memory. Um, yeah, so that's pretty much all my thoughts on those 3 episodes. So probably a little bit longer than I thought. Apologize for my stuffiness. I guess transitioning weather and whatnot is just going to affect me as it sometimes does. Probably won't be the last time it happens as we get further into winter. But moving right along, I got this up. Hopefully, won't be as long of a gap until the next one. I'm going to try to do roughly these once a week, trying to get them up on Fridays. And there might be some more clusters of episodes. We'll see. But still trying to aim for getting it wrapped up in January. Probably a week or two after the new year, we'll hope. But we will see in the meantime. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for listening. Appreciate you sticking with me through this. Let me know your thoughts, feelings, and your ideas about expectations about watching or rewatching the next couple episodes. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening, and stay magical.